Yo, what's up guys, welcome back. So, it has been a while. Domain Monarchs for the new format, so both Supreme Darkness. I'm well aware this is not your top tier deck. It's still a solid tier 4 deck, but I still like it, it's still fun. I didn't do a deck profile in our previous format because of Fire King, because of Snake Eyes, and mainly the deck was main-decking too many main-deckable outs to, your core strategy for this particular deck. For example, Diablo Star to attack over basically everything and shut down Domain. Anyway, so in the new format, looking at Ryzeal, looking at Maliss, 10 by a little less, but all the other decks, it feels that there is potential. Especially looking at the most main decks now, the most important card is Droplet. If people start to drop it from the main deck, there is potential, and even if they decided to drop it from the side deck, there is also a lot of potential, because it's basically Droplet. You're losing to Droplet. Imperm doesn't matter. Ash Blossom, yeah, it hurts, but it essentially doesn't matter. Droplet is a card that deals with your entire strategy. So this is the current deck, 40 cards in the main deck. There are some differences compared to the previous build. A couple of extra cards to discuss, and of course the side deck. You're not running the extra deck because obviously this is the domain variant, so you want to get your opponent or lock your opponent from the extra deck. Basically, that's how fun it is, right? Fun. So let's start off with the monsters first. There aren't really that many surprises, I think. We are still rocking 3 Erebus. I think most people know what they do, so I'm not going into full explanation. There is no reason to go for that. Still to Aether, you could go for 1 Aether. The biggest reason why she's still there is to tribute summon her during her opponent's turn to potentially, make Domain live still if your opponent is able to deal with your tribute summoned monster. Plus, she's also one of the OG Monarchs, well, second wave, I guess, in the structure deck that sends your spell and traps to the graveyard to set up Prime, to set up Pantheism. So she's still the second to best Monarch compared to Erebus, obviously. So those are still important. So 5 of the bigger ones. These are still stable. Why? It speaks for itself, right? Both of them, both Majesty's Fiend and Vanity's Fiend, say that your opponent cannot play the game, no special summons, no monster effects. Why is this important? Again, it speaks for itself, but the reason why they are maximized is they are 1-card tributes. Because again, in most situations where, let's say, you're going second, stuff like Stormfort, you're only able to tribute summon away 1 monster, and let's say against the most common matchup nowadays against Ryzeal, they have Detonator. Obviously, there is like hardly any way to commit for 2 tributes, especially if your opponent has Detonator on the field. Most of the time it's either, let's say, Stormfort, you can tribute away the Detonator, or you need more, let's say, Domain to lower the levels of, Erebus, but Detonator can, start popping stuff. So that's definitely not feasible in that particular matchup. So let's say again, number 1, and you're forced to go second. You need those 1-card tribute summons. And that's why they are so important. And now, as you know, both of these are crucial as well. Again, looking at Detonator, for example, where the new Twin Eclipse, the new exceed that, let's say, Detonator pops itself or, is tributed away off a Stormfort, they can just reborn Detonator, right? But these prevent that. So both Vanity's Fiend and Majesty's Fiend, right? So again, those 1-card tribute summons, and on top of that, they prevent your opponent from playing the game, is far too important. So 11 tributes, again, I don't think that's different compared to most previous profiles I did in the past, right? 3 of the Pendulum, and Camoufried, however you pronounce the name, basically an upstart. It does play into the Mulch army, so that's a small deal. But let's say going first, it's still so important. Getting the upstart and of course a tribute monster Father on field, that's really crucial. It's a card that I tend to side deck out going second because it does lock you from Stormfort, right? Stormfort prevents the extra deck summons, and Camouflage is actually an extra deck summon, so that hurts a little bit. So speaking of Tribute Father, I think I was about to say best card in the deck, but it's probably indeed one of the best, if not the best cards, because it does everything. It's a tribute monster in worst case scenario. It deals with established boards. It searches another copy of itself, and so on and so on. Fenrir, right? This is also not new, but a small Unicorn package again, potentially hitting their extra deck. It's another Kashtira on field, Kashtira into Theosis, into Fenrir, into another search, and I added in Ogre again, you know, potentially, as you know, Ogre has the same stats as, for example, where is it? As Tenacity, right? So you can potentially search Ogre of a Fenrir and reveal it for Tenacity, search Pantheism, and go from there. So this is fairly solid as, let's say, a tribute engine, worst case scenario, 2 tributes, and tribute father engine, and it deals with established boards. So it's far too good. Hopefully for this deck, they won't hit Fenrir in the TCG. And this is basically filler, but basically more copies of Fenrir. That's the most important card in the deck that gets your ball, this gets your engine rolling. So this is basically a super flexible engine with draw power and search power, and deals with established, you know, established boards if it needs to. I was playing Birth as well, but that means that you're running both Theosis and Birth in the main deck, and that kinda is awkward, especially if you're not opening with any of your Kashtira cards, and that, you know, could happen. So opening Birth and Theosis feels awkward. The spells, no surprises, I think. We have 3 Pantheism, 3 Tenacity to search the Pantheism or the Stormfort. Again, no surprises. I think this is fairly staple. So yeah, hitting the detonator is crucial. And that's why these are here. I was main decking Change of Heart before, Snatch Steal on the top of my mind as well. But biggest problem of these cards is that they are, you know, they target. And again, looking at Detonator, let's say if you use Change of Heart, targeting the Detonator, they can just pop themselves and, you know, Reborn with Eclipse, reattach a couple of cards, and you just played yourself with the Change of Heart. So I'm not recommending these. So Stormfort doesn't target, and Stormfort does deal with the potential Ryzeal field. Your win condition, I guess, Domini. Prevents your opponent from using their extra deck if they don't control a tribute summon monster. I was contemplating on dropping a return from the main deck, but going first, it's still important to search your tribute monsters. But going second, again, into a Ryzeal board, for example, or, you know, Maliss with interruption, it's awkward. So, because again, Ryzeal just pops and you can't commit continuous spells or traps or whatever to the field because Detonator will, you know, just pop themselves. But still going first and, you know, going second, Sidedeck, use Sidedeck 1 out, maybe even 2 against something like Ryzeal. Still 1 March, far too important, but sadly it does not protect you against Droplet. Again, Imperm doesn't matter, Ash Blossom doesn't matter, it's one card that if your opponent is playing it, they will always draw it, always, but it you know, bypasses March. It hits this deck because it indirectly hits Domain as well, you know, halving the attack of your tribute monster, shutting down its effects. Just like Imperm, but if you have Domain up, you know, they just can't deal with your tribute monster. But Droplet, you know, it's an easy answer for that. So, I was about to say that's basically it for the Monarchs parent subs, but Prime Monarch again won. The format feels far too fast. I don't think there's, you know, just like in the old school days, running 2 or even 3, definitely not 3. So 39 cards in a main deck, so that means that you have 1 flex spot, and that's good for now, over like, let's say, Upstart Goblin. Chicken Game was in the back of my mind as well, but feels awkward when you use Chicken Game, and even though you're running multiple field spells, it happens that you don't draw a field spell, don't have an option for a field spell. So Goods is essentially another, well, Pantheism basically to search Stormfort, for example. So 40 cards sharp, that's super important. Other options are looking at the side deck first, right? That's, I think, much more important. The Bestials, again, in the back of my mind. Looking at Lubellion, maybe, but the Bestials are important, so they are the biggest reason why these are not in the main deck. If you're going first, it's not a reliable tribute engine, just like Kashtira or Idea Eidos even. But going second, you know, against basically any Fiendsmith deck, for example, these are superb. Maybe even against Ryzeal to deal with potential Detonator, but, you know, the Twin Exceed kind of shuts it down as well, right? Like how strong Druid's Worm is. But still Bestials. Board Tribes, right? Going second, that might be a staple going in. Same for the evenly matched still. Looking at Labyrinth, looking at Rogue. This deck is Rogue. but it could be a blowout, people not expecting it. Going first, this is a staple, obviously, when you're going first because of something like Stormfort or Duster or Droplet, if they do have it. And now, a couple of new cards, but I think really sweet decks for this particular deck to deal with your biggest counters, Droplet. And that's this one. So you know this one, Invader of Darkness. It's a super old school card. What is it? Invasion of Chaos. You probably know the card. You know, it's a double tribute summon, so that's already important. But Invader of Darkness prevents your opponent from using quick play spells. Looking at Droplet, I might be coping on this, but Domain with this, if no Droplet, no Cosmic Cyclone, what are the, Chalice. Chalice is another one from the top of my head. There are probably more. The book cards. That's pretty disgusting. That's pretty good. The only downside is that this is not searchable. So I have a second copy. If I find a space in the side deck, I will definitely side deck this one twice against Runic, looking at Joshua. Or, you know, White Forest, stuff like that. It's actually a solid deck, but biggest weakness, it's not searchable, sadly. But I think it's a good deck. The last one, and this is a card that is not really new. I'm kind of in love with this card, especially only going second, because again, it deals with established boards. Like before, you were side decking maybe Dark Ruler no more, right, and stuff like that. You aren't side decking Ra's Fear mode because it sacrificed your normal summon, but you know what I mean. You're looking for this deck. There is no one-card engines, hardly, like Snake Eyes. So you need solid cards that go along the goal of the deck, and that deal with established boards or force out an omni-negation, again looking at Desiree, and that's this. So Spellgod Soul Exchange, what does it do? Short set. It's basically a soul exchange, very similar to Stormfort. It doesn't target, so that's already super important, and that's what the reason why, you know, it's already better than Snatch Steal and Change of Heart for this deck. You can tribute multiple monsters on your opponent's side of the field, depending on the tribute monster, you know, you're revealed in your hand. So let's say if you go second, obviously because you're side decking it going second, you have Soul Exchange and your opponent has, you know, basically any deck has at least 2 monsters on field to capitalize on your double tribute summon, Detonator and Dweller, or I don't know, multiple bosses. You can just use this one, so Soul Exchange. If they don't negate it, you know, there are omni-negations, looking at, you know, the Cybers deck with the Fusion in the graveyard, looking at, you know, Desiree, for example. Okay, sure, you know, that's the deal currently, right? But if they don't negate it, you can reveal the Erebus, tribute summon the Erebus, and using 2 monsters on their side of the field, and then use Erebus. And that's pretty solid. There is just hardly any card looking at the side deck, if you know you're going second, that deals with an established board and gets your engine rolling. So that's actually pretty solid. The problem again is, let's say against Ryzeal with, you know, your Detonator and your Eclipse equipped, they can reborn Detonator, but the beautiful thing is that if it's Erebus, for example, or, you know, the Fiends, they cannot do that, obviously, but if it's Erebus and to tribute away their, you know, their Detonator, they can reborn Detonator, but Erebus still triggers, and it's all in the same chain, so you can potentially target the same Ryzeal Detonator they're reborn off of the, you know, the Eclipse card. So it won't trigger Detonator, short set. So I'm actually in love with this card, but sadly only going second. Keep in mind that your opponent is able to potentially tribute summon monsters on your side of the field if you use this card, right? After you tribute summoned your monster, but they cannot tribute away the tributed monsters, so that could be important. Let's say if you have like a Kashtira, you know, Kashtira monsters on your side of the field, they can potentially tribute away your Fenrir if it's already there for, let's say, a Bestial. Okay, 15 cards in the extra deck, you know, side deck, and this is a bonus one. You know, Obelisk. Obelisk was played, the new Obelisk, the one that's allowed to being played in the main deck. You know, this Obelisk, it sadly needs 3 tributes, but, you know, spell card, Soul Exchange, get if your opponent has three monsters, you can instantly get the Obelisk on field. It cannot be targeted, which is fantastic. Your opponent cannot activate card effects, both cannot activate card effects as soon as it's summoned. But again, the major deal is this Droplet. Droplet still deals with this card, and it needs 3 tributes. So this is, you know, this is coping really hard. but I will, I would prefer Invader of Darkness in the side deck over, let's say, an Obelisk. So yeah, that's basically it. 2 extra cards. You probably already saw them. I'm getting a lot of questions, why not these? Morganite is far too slow. There's like a new Morganite that searches the Morganite. No, far too slow, especially going first. You just need all of your 5 cards to capitalize, and getting those 2 draws, potentially extra summon later in the duel. If you're dead, it doesn't really matter that much, so never, at least for now. This, on the other hand, might be an okay one, but only going first, obviously. But for this deck, basically the setup of, let's say, well, either one of your tribute monsters, it doesn't really matter, with your domain essentially does the same, right? Like if you have this particular setup, domain, and like a tribute monster to block your opponent from the extra deck, it basically does the same as Erupt. Okay, Erupt negates monster effects, right? The thing is that if your opponent is able to deal with your tribute Droplet, looking at Droplet, or Lightning Storm, it deals always with your board, always. So sure, Erupt might survive if your tributes are away until, what is it, your next end phase, but I'm not so sure about Return, or Erupt, sorry. Only for True Draco, then it's a super stable. But for this domain and, consistency, 40 cards main deck, this does the job really well. And so for me, that's basically it. So if you have any suggestions, definitely let me know. Okay, guys, so thanks for watching. Feel free to leave a comment or like if you enjoyed the video. Riddim signing out. Peace.